Viewer discretion is advised. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nobody saw it coming. Not the bailiff, not the press, no one. When the side doors opened and Will Smith walked into the courtroom alone, no publicist, no lawyer, the room froze. Was this real? Was he even supposed to be here? He didn't look at Diddy. He just walked forward. Not like a celebrity making a scene, but like a man ready to speak a truth that's been buried for years. Before we get into what Will just revealed about Diddy, Jay-Z, and even Oprah, quick reminder. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty. We're reporting what's been said publicly. And real quick, comment where you're watching from. I love seeing where this community's tuning in from. Let's get into it. Until that moment, his name had only floated around the edges of the Diddy scandal. Rumors, leaks, a few memes, whispers in interviews. But Will had stayed silent, even when old party photos resurfaced. Even when Diddy's ex-bodyguard Gene Deal started hinting that the other man in an alleged tape might be Will. He never said a word, until now. What followed next wasn't just another celebrity testimony. It wasn't damage control. It was something else entirely. A reckoning. Will didn't wait for permission. "I wasn't asked to come here today," he said. "I asked if I could speak." And the judge, who had been skeptical at first, gave him the nod. That's when the silence in the room shifted from confusion to tension. Because whatever Will Smith was about to say, people knew it would be big. He didn't waste time. "I've kept a lot inside for a long time," he said. "I've smiled on red carpets. I've told jokes on late night. I've made movies about strength, about standing tall, but none of that can hide what I saw, or what was done to me." Then he turned slightly, not all the way, just enough for everyone to know who he meant. "You did," he said, eyes fixed on Diddy. "It started," he said, with what seemed like a regular invitation, a party. One of Diddy's infamous birthday blowouts, nothing new in Hollywood. But this one felt different from the second he stepped inside. SUVs lined the driveway, phones taken at the door. "They said it was for privacy," Will told the court. "But I felt it in my gut. This wasn't about protecting guests. This was about hiding something." The house was cold. Not physically, but emotionally. Music played, slow, ambient. Mirrors on every wall. No obvious cameras, but Will said it felt like someone was always watching. "What other celebrities do you think were?" "Then Diddy came over to me," he continued. "Put his arm around my shoulder and said, 'Now you're part of the family.'" He smiled when he said it, but Will said it wasn't a warm smile. It felt like ownership. He followed Diddy into a back room. He thought it was for business, maybe a private conversation. What he walked into instead shook him to the core. "There were people there," he said, his voice dropping. "Men, women, some of them I recognized. Others looked young, too young, and they were performing, for Diddy, for others. Like it was entertainment." Will didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. And Diddy, he was laughing, like it was the most normal thing in the world. He paused, swallowed, collected himself. "I didn't know how to leave," he admitted. "And that was the point. Once you were in, you were in." Days later he got a call. Blocked number. "Hope you had fun, Fresh Prince." Then silence. He tried to brush it off. Until a package showed up at his office. No return address. Just a flash drive inside. And when he watched it, everything changed. "I almost didn't look," Will said. "But I did. And there I was, on a couch, clearly out of it, laughing at something I don't even remember. And behind the camera was Diddy's voice, saying, 'That's how we keep him.'" Gasps filled the room. Some of the jury members looked stunned. The judge looked tense. Even Diddy, who had spent the trial trying to look unfazed, suddenly looked small. "That moment," Will said, "was when I realized I hadn't been invited to that party. I'd been initiated." From there, it spiraled. More invites, more pressure. When he said no, things would shift. Meetings would get canceled. Projects would quietly fall apart. Rumors would start. Stories that only someone with inside access could have leaked. "They didn't need to say anything directly," he said. "It was just clear. Silence was the price of peace." He mentioned a campaign in 2013, a major brand. International deal. Everything was set. Photos taken, contracts pending. Then suddenly it vanished. No explanation, just gone. 2 weeks later, Another Diddy event invite. When he declined again, the gossip started. It was psychological warfare, Will said. Make you think you're crazy. Make you think you're paranoid. But it was real. I saw the pattern. He wasn't alone. He told the jury that others were going through the same thing. Celebrities, artists, producers, some still afraid to speak, others silenced by contracts. But he'd reached a point where staying silent felt worse than speaking. Because when you stay quiet long enough, he said, your silence becomes your legacy. And then came the tapes. He said the first time he heard about secret audio being played in court, he didn't believe it. Then someone from his past called him, someone he used to trust. They played a tape, they said, and you were on it. He didn't want to believe it, but he couldn't ignore it. The memories started coming back. The party, the flash drive, the fear, the manipulation, and the feeling he hadn't just been targeted, he'd been trapped. So he called the prosecution himself. I told them, I'm ready, he said. Whatever questions you have, I'll answer them. When they played the audio for him, it hit hard. I heard myself laughing, he said. But it wasn't real. I sounded drunk or drugged. And in the background, voices cheering, whispering. Then I heard Diddy say something like, that's how we break them in. And then I heard my name. His voice cracked, just once, but it was enough. The jury could see it. The judge could see it. Everyone knew this wasn't performance. This was pain. I never consented to being recorded, Will said, but he kept it, maybe to use, maybe just to hold power. But he had it. And for years, I didn't even know it existed. The worst part, he said, wasn't even what he heard. It was what he didn't remember. You start realizing your trauma isn't just emotional, it's physical. Your body remembers what your mind tries to forget. By the time he finished, you could hear people breathing again, like they'd all held their breath together. The courtroom wasn't just quiet, it was stunned. Will looked around one last time, then turned to Diddy and said, you didn't just collect people, you controlled them. And for the first time, Diddy had no smirk, no comeback, just silence. Will stood, took something from his pocket, a photo. This was me, he said. In 2004, right before the first party, that's the man I used to be. He held it up. The court watched in silence. I haven't seen him in years, he said. Then he turned to the jury. If you think this is just about me, or Cassie, or one party in one mansion, you're missing the big picture. This is about a system, a network of silence, and if we don't tear it down, it'll keep going. He walked out without saying another word. And inside that courtroom, nobody knew what to say either. What made Will Smith's testimony hit harder than anything else wasn't just what he said. It was what it triggered. Because the moment he walked out of that courtroom, everything started shaking. Agencies, studios, magazines, every level of Hollywood's image machine suddenly looked like it had been built on a fault line. A quiet one that no one wanted to talk about. But after that day, silence wasn't just hard. It was impossible. Within 24 hours, PR teams were in emergency mode. Brand managers scrambled. 2 endorsements tied to Will were pulled without warning. One studio froze the release campaign for a movie he'd already finished filming. But Will didn't react. He didn't try to save face. He didn't defend himself. Because he already knew what was coming. He told the court this would happen. He said it plainly. I expect backlash. I expect lies. I expect someone to try and bury me in a new rumor or leak something meant to humiliate me. I'm not here to protect myself anymore. I'm here to protect the truth. And he meant it. What followed wasn't a PR campaign. It was destruction. Because people weren't just listening to Will. They were remembering the stories they'd brushed off. Remembering the footage they saw but didn't understand. Remembering the red flags everyone once called Hollywood eccentricity. The old interviews came back first. Clips where celebrities were asked about Diddy and gave vague, nervous laughs. People brushing off questions about parties they suddenly forgot attending. There were always rumors about Diddy's infamous freak-offs, but now, people started looking at them differently. And then came the pictures. Grainy photos from the early 2000s. Events that once seemed glamorous now looked strange. Eyes darting away from cameras. Familiar faces looking trapped in a moment they didn't want to be in. People started putting it all together. It wasn't just a few bad nights. It was a pattern. One of those resurfaced photos showed Will and Diddy at a 2004 party in Miami. At the time, it was sold to tabloids as a star-studded bash with champagne, cigars, and music royalty everywhere. But what didn't make the headlines then, what's being dissected now, is the buffet served off the chest of a naked woman. A detail that was once dismissed as celebrity excess, now viewed through a different lens. Opulence masking something darker. People went further. They started reviewing old footage from the Fresh Prince era. Not the scripted parts, the interviews, the panels. The candid red carpet moments where Diddy's name would come up, and Will would visibly stiffen. It wasn't obvious at the time, but now those subtle expressions spoke volumes. And then came the rabbit holes. People combed through every public connection between Will and Diddy. Old collaborations, award show encounters, mutual friends. Hay remembered that Diddy had defended Will just hours after the infamous Oscar slap in 2022. "We're going to solve this like family," he'd said. At the time, it sounded like reconciliation. Now, it sounded like familiarity. Even more damning were the old interviews where Diddy had publicly denied rumors involving Will and Jada. In one 2023 appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live, he dismissed a question about a threesome rumor involving Jada and Jennifer Lopez as crazy. But in hindsight, the denial didn't settle anything. It just raised more questions. And in the middle of all of this were the Smith children, Willow and Jaden. In October 2024, a viral rumor spread claiming they had accused their parents of selling them to Diddy. The claim caught fire across social media, with doctored thumbnails showing Willow in bed with Diddy, shared by channels desperate for views. Snopes stepped in and labeled it unfounded. No evidence, no video, just sensational gossip wrapped in real fear. But the reason it spread so quickly wasn't because people believed it. It was because the idea didn't sound that far-fetched anymore. Because the raids had already happened by then. March 25, 2024. Federal agents executed warrants on Diddy's homes in Los Angeles and Miami. Phones were seized, guns found. Reports surfaced of Homeland Security agents swarming his mansion just hours before Diddy was scheduled to leave for the Bahamas. And among the many things confiscated, baby oil. Over 1,000 bottles of it. At first, it became a meme. Diddy's baby oil stash trended for days. But when Cassie took the stand and described what actually happened at those parties, the joke stopped being funny. She called them freak-offs. Said they involved sex acts, drugs, coercion, and sometimes cameras. She told the court she'd begged Diddy to delete videos. Said she feared them leaking. One text shown in court read, "You are sick for thinking it's okay to do what you've done to me." Another, sent after an injury, simply read, "So you remember." And the jury saw that footage. Not just photos, not secondhand rumors. Real surveillance tape of Diddy dragging Cassie across a hotel floor in Los Angeles. In court, Cassie said she'd learned not to fight back, that it made things worse. "I just stayed still," she told the jury. Like an object. When the prosecution brought up the videos again, the judge made a decision that shocked the media. Only the jury would be allowed to see them. No press, no public, no recordings. And that's when speculation exploded. Because if the tapes were that sensitive, that graphic, that damning, what else did they show? Will's name wasn't the only one floating around. Ashton Kutcher, Leonardo DiCaprio, Nick Cannon, even Justin Bieber, all mentioned by Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, in an interview. "If the man in the tape is black and an A-lister bigger than Diddy," he said, "Will Smith is the first one that comes to mind." He later added that if the person was white, he hoped it wasn't Bieber. And suddenly, those weren't just wild guesses. They were fuel. Because the mystery man on the tape was said to be horrified, afraid of the footage being leaked, wondering who had a copy, and where it might end up. Will hinted at this during his testimony. And now people are wondering, how many others have been kept? Because this wasn't just about control. This was about blackmail, influence, leverage, a hidden economy where silence was bought with power, and power was maintained with fear. One person who knew this well was Diddy's former assistant, David James. He told the court that his boss kept a stash of pills, including one bottle featuring Barack Obama's face. He described being ordered to drive Diddy to a late-night meeting with Suge Knight, armed with 3 guns. "It was the first time I realized my life was in danger," James said. The names kept piling up. Don Richard testified that Usher saw Diddy punch Cassie in public. Michael B. Jordan's name came up when Cassie admitted Diddy was jealous of her spending time with him. Kid Cudi had to break up with her after threats. Even Kanye West, who once posted "Free Puff" on X, was rumored to be on the list of 100-plus people presented to potential jurors. So many of these names have tried to distance themselves. "I don't have to do with Puffy," Will said during a performance in San Diego. "I ain't been anywhere near no damn freak-off. Don't put me in that bull's tea." It was one of the first times he publicly acknowledged the growing speculation. But even that wasn't enough to stop the narrative. Because once you're part of the picture, even if you didn't ask to be, you can't just erase your face. The courtroom sketch of Diddy wearing a soft sweater went viral. People joked he looked like Mr. Rogers, but the truth was more haunting. He was no longer the icon, the myth. He was just another man on trial. A man facing a lifetime in prison. His defense team said the government had no right to police his private sex life. But the evidence showed something different. It showed force, fear, footage. It showed a pattern stretching back over a decade. And with Will's testimony, the cracks turned into a collapse. This wasn't just a celebrity feud. It wasn't a scandal. It was exposure of how the most powerful people in the world can keep everyone quiet, not with threats, but with systems, with money, with influence, with secrets. And Will, he's not asking for applause. He's not asking for forgiveness. He's not even asking to be believed. He just stopped running. And that, in a town built on illusion, is the most dangerous move of all. Because truth doesn't need special effects. It just needs a witness. And now the world has one. What do you think is really going on behind the scenes? Drop your theories in the comments below. I read every single one.